On the final day of 2024, it is the final episode of the podcast and round of the A-League for the year. Santa Claus has come and gone, so who was on the nice list and who's been a little bit naughty? Well, perhaps Alan Stajic, who was sent to the stands in the final moments of the Wanderers' win against Adelaide to end the final undefeated streak of the season. Controversially, so was Zinedine Machach, barely a quarter of an hour into the Big Blue. I think the big man in red may have mixed up his lists with that one. Costa Barbarouses was gifted a wonderfully cheap turnover to loft over the head of Ryan Scott, who may be hoping he'd wished for a new pair of boots, given I'm pretty sure one is still irretrievably tangled in the Wellington net. Perth Glory and Mustafa Amini weren't feeling very merry at all, as the former announced he is launching legal action against the club after they unilaterally terminated his contract. All that drama, plenty more from the rest of the round, and our New Year's resolutions on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan, Avil, and I'm joined in solidarity tonight by Jacob Stevens. Jacob, hello to you. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, all that.
Yeah, to you too, and to all of our listeners as well. Hope everything's been nice for you guys over this holiday period. Weather's been, at least here in Adelaide, it's been all right. A couple of really hot days, but for the most part, quite pleasant. So been enjoying the time off work and still at it with the podcast, which is the main thing because
absolutely,
we know everybody's expecting it. So we've got to deliver on that.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we say everyone's expecting it. There have been another number of podcasts that have, dropped out of the running over Christmas. So someone's got to be here, right?
That's right.
Someone's got to get the content out. Very happy to be here talking A-League with you all. If you are watching on YouTube as well, we are so close. We're about 20 odd subscribers away from 500. We wanted to get that by New Year's Eve. So you got one day. You got a day.
Not long, guys.
You got a day to get us there. It'll be a nice New Year's Eve surprise. Let's start with the Big Blue, shall we? Because it's the most controversial point of the entire weekend. We can't go more than a couple of minutes without talking about it. Zinedine Machach sent off for what was the official reasoning? Challenge with the studs with excessive force above the ankle. Look, I'm watching this live, Jacob, and I cannot believe that either VAR has suggested a review and then the referee goes to the screen and overturns it. It feels so out of touch with the game, and just the idea that he's going in with excessive force. Like, are you kidding me? Like, he's literally got his foot on top of the ball. Jordan Courtney-Perkins plays at the ball from the underside and knocks the ball away. And of course, Machach's boot is going to go down. It makes contact. I think you have to give a yellow card. That's fair. But to then say that's excessive force and he had any other intent than to play the ball is just ridiculous for me.
It's one of those really irritating ones because we've seen it go both ways, not necessarily in the A-League, but in world football. It's the sort of challenge that happens a lot, right? Because of the nature of the game, you're going to have some players that are playing sort of through the ball, some that are going to be sort of coming almost sort of over the top in a way, just simply because of the way people move and the way that they approach the ball and things like that. So it's one where you see it, you do see it a lot, or a similar one is where somebody slides in and their foot hits the ball and bounces back up over it and catches somebody. Similar sort of scenario. And it's really unfortunate that like it's one of those ones where you look back at it on replay in slow-mo and in some circumstances it can look a lot worse than it was. Like this, there is clearly no intent from Machach to engage in serious foul play as it would have been designated. Like it was simply him challenging for the ball, and the fact that the way that he challenged for the ball meant that once he actually got on top of the ball and Courtney Perkins played it, there was nowhere else for his foot to go. And like I said, it's one we've seen given as a red and not given as a red. It was, I was fairly certain it was a Liverpool player a season or so ago had a similar, I think it might have been Curtis Jones, had a similar challenge that was given a red. Jurriën Timber for Arsenal earlier this season, it wasn't given a red. Here, Machach, it is given a red. So it just seems like even the referees can't agree on whether it's a red card or not.
It's like when you think of those ones where like a player goes over the top of the ball, right? It's usually like in a sliding motion. The studs are pointed sideways, and if you're too high, then your foot goes over the wall and you make contact, right? But there's literally like 90 degrees of differentiation here. Like he's literally trying
on top.
He's
Yeah.
on top of the ball trying to control it.
Yeah.
And he can't help that someone has then played it out from underneath.
Mm.
Like, I
agree.
I don't get it. I
No,
seriously don't.
this is why, like, it reminds me of that Timber challenge I just mentioned, because that was a very similar one. Timber tried to do a little spin on the ball as he was doing it, and then the ball was played out from underneath him, and he ended up stepping on the player's ankle, and it wasn't given a red card. It was just given as a yellow. VAR reviewed it and said no, there wasn't any excessive force, so it's not a red card. Whereas here they've determined that there was excessive force, so it was worth the red card. I don't quite understand that position. I'm not sure has the FA come out with an explanation.
Well, the FA came out straight away. So sometimes we get these statements in the middle of the match, and I think people do misinterpret it a little bit. The statement from John Moss was simply clarifying what the decision was for, which was serious foul play. The MRP has come out on Monday afternoon. He will get a 1-game ban. I don't know if there's an appeal process there, but we've never really seen those pay off. So it seems like he'll be out next week. Oh, not next week. They're playing Wednesday, right, against Auckland. Tough for him. Do you think, like, how much of this do you think is a refereeing issue and how much is a VAR issue? Because one of my big problems with VAR is as soon as you have enough time to think over it, and slow motion is an issue as well, but you get trapped in one line in the rule book because you have so much time to think about it. And the guidance that we've received is that as soon as studs hit above the ankle, is that it's going to be a red card. But as soon as you play it that slow, and like, it only really flicks the guy's Courtney Perkins, like, kind of shin as it goes down to his foot as well. So technically, by the letter of the law, studs above the ankle, red card. But that law isn't, like, based in the context of the reality of football, right? Like, you can't set such definitive lines on it, and as soon as you slow it down for VAR, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, I think they sort of go hand in hand, right? It's because you still have the referees that are in charge of VAR, so the difference in interpretation and application of the law, whether that's on the field by the match referee or whether it's by VAR in the VAR booth, you're still going to get those inconsistencies. And you mentioned, sort of the law. I think that's where some of this grey area and the ability to interpret things differently, it comes back to bite you, because it's not as clear cut as if there is contact above the ankle, it is a straight red card every single time. But obviously the location of where the contact is made plays a part in the decision-making process. So, it is something that they do take into account, and perhaps it is a case of they're just applying focus on the wrong areas of it, right? Rather than looking at what was the force that was applied, or, the sort of the scenario leading up to the challenge. They simply looked at, well, there were studs and it touched him in the shin, and that's all well and good. And those are two very important parts of the process, but you're also sort of by focusing on those, perhaps neglecting some of the other things that maybe would make this not such a red card incident. So I think that it's a problem both ways, in that, because it's so up to interpretation, referees on the pitch and referees watching it on a video screen, with the ability to slow it down and choose all the different angles, they're still going to come up with these inconsistencies. And I think perhaps it is about reframing these things a little bit more, and it's something that John Moss, I'm sure, will do throughout his time, is sort of get everybody on the same page. Because if there's one thing we're always hearing from people, it's that we understand that referees are humans, they're going to make mistakes, but we at least just want consistency in the way that things are applied and things are done. And I think
I hate that, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, but like, if that's the best that we can ask for, then that's the best that we can ask for at this point. And perhaps it does necessitate sort of a reframing of some of these laws when it comes to red card challenges, because I do think that in recent years we've seen this trend towards just stud contact is a straight red card, where perhaps the severity of the incident doesn't quite warrant it.
Yeah, it can't be blanket, right? Like, just imagine, to take it to a ridiculous extreme, right? Like, if you got like two mates on opposition teams and someone's laying on the ground, he's like wiping some mud off his boots on the bloke's ankle, right? Like, technically that is studs to shin or whatever. You're going to give a red card for that? Absolutely not. So there has to be some middle ground, some interpretation there. And it's gone way too far, hasn't it? So I guess yeah, the ramifications of that is that Victory, had to play most of that game with 10 men. Would it have made a difference to the result? I'd probably say no,
Probably
to be
not.
honest.
No.
They're 1-0 up. I mean, the second goal, Douglas Costa, what a ball, right, to bring it in to Joe Lolly. You're not stopping that no matter if you have 15 players on the field jamming in the box. That's just a bit of quality. I think Costa really, I know he came off just after halftime as well with a little bit of a hamstring complaint. But I thought he really stepped up in this game as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Just the little dribbles, like he had the little flip flop, and the cross was beautiful as well. And Joe Lolly as well. Obviously, they're without Patrick Klimala for a couple of weeks still, I think. So he comes in at a number 9 and almost scores a first half hat trick with that third one just disallowed for offside. Incredible shift from him as well.
Yeah, Costa's really sort of finding his groove now in the league, which I think is a bit of a worrying sign for some of the other clubs, because when you've got somebody of his quality, and we've seen it, and he's actually starting to really apply that on the pitch and is in some good form. He was involved in all 3 goals against Adelaide a couple of rounds ago. Obviously had only a short stint in this match, but was still extremely effective in the final third. And then, you're able to partner that with some other quality up front like Joe Lolly. And obviously he played sort of as a number 9 in this game as well, more central, which we haven't seen a huge amount of, but he's looked rather ineffective, I suppose, out wide this season. It just seems like he hasn't quite had the impact that he's had in previous seasons. What that's down to, I'm not quite sure, whether it's the change in coach and the change in philosophy, where things are a little bit more sort of freestyle, whereas in the past things have flowed through him a lot more. It could be down to that. But, he looked all right in this game, I thought. And again, if you can you've got Douglas Costa finding form, if you get Joe Lolly finding his form again, obviously Klimala is out at the moment, but, we know the quality that he has when he's on the pitch as well. That's a really we've spoken about how dangerous it is on paper, but we're yet to really see it in the league. So, it's exciting signs for Sydney fans that, hang on, they're starting to figure things out here and really start to fire on all cylinders. And, we've seen this league trend from sort of this gritty style of football towards a more attacking, flowing style of football just generally across the league over the last few seasons. And Sydney are really starting to personify that a lot. So it's really exciting signs for them.
Do we know how bad Costa was? It didn't seem like he was actually that bad. He seemed like he didn't want to be taken off, but I guess they kind of already won the game by that point.
I think, it could potentially have just been a preventative thing of there's a little niggle rather than risk it having play out another 10, 20 minutes and it no properly chance. Go. Because I don't think that they've released a statement yet on it. So that's typically a good sign, because if it's bad, they'll know. So fingers crossed that it's all good for him, because like I said, he's just starting to find his feet in the league. So it'd be a shame for him to then be out injured for a couple of weeks.
Talking about finding your feet, Western Sydney Wanderers took the undefeated streak away from Adelaide United on Friday night. Adelaide came out of the blocks really, really well. Again, Jacob, like 2 goals, Alagic, Goodwin, Falami, all combining, all really good. But the Wanderers, it's funny, they're so consistent, right? As inconsistent as they are, they're so consistent. They score goals. They let in goals and they score goals, right? It's just wild. You'd never know who's going to score more goals than the other. They're always going to score, and they came back, and it's more drop points at Adelaide at home as well.
Really impressive performance from the Wanderers, because every coach and team that has come to Adelaide this season in their press conferences afterwards constantly talking about how difficult a place it is to travel away to.
Great crowd as well, right?
Especially when you've got a crowd like that, right? 13,000 people, one of the best in years at Coopers, and to go there and to just completely silence it for most of the game. It was a really, really impressive performance. And I thought that Stajic got a lot right in this game, honestly, with his game plan and the way that they set out about it. Obviously, Adelaide, relatively good start. It did take them a few minutes to get into the groove of things. I think both teams were sort of trying to feel each other out for the first 10 or so. Adelaide had a good 15-minute stint where they got those couple of goals. That Alagic goal in particular I thought was outstanding. The strike. It was very Craig Goodwin-esque. And when we were all sort of like, who's just hit that? And we see Alagic celebrate, we're like, no way, Alagic has just hit that. And it was. So that was a very impressive strike. But Goodwin getting on the score sheet again.
How many has he got now?
4 or 5, I think, which pretty decent considering he wasn't the number 1 starter at the start of the season. It was Jovanovic.
He's completely taken over now.
Yeah, he has now. And with Cole has spoken about their being some issues behind the scenes with Jovanovic in terms of his attitude.
Right.
So that's why he was out of the squad completely on game day.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
It sure does. It sure does. But I think, Goodwin's pretty firmly secured that spot with that performance. But the Wanderers, to their credit, they didn't really let that get them down. Obviously, they then got that goal right on the stroke of half time with basically the last kick of the ball, and went into the sheds clearly with the better energy, and then came out of it in the second half and just did not let Adelaide get back into the game. And I sort of asked Stadge about this after the game, and I said, you just completely killed the game off. Like, what was it that did it, right? Because they had a really good time in the midfield, which is something a lot of teams have struggled against Adelaide with. Is Adelaide have a sort of box midfield? They have 4 people in there with Clough, Mork, Alagic and Barnett, and that generally just dictates the tempo of the game. But the Wanderers, they were really strong on marking the 2 double pivot players of Alagic and Barnett, didn't let them turn on the ball, which is something that Sydney did. And that's where Adelaide really came into the game there, was they could turn into the midfield, into space. Wanderers shut that down completely. They did a really good job there. But then even when the ball went out wide, they were double teaming the wingers and doing a good job of shutting that down. And then when they were on the ball, they slowed the game down completely. They didn't look to play quickly because they knew that was going to play into Adelaide's hands because the game would be more transitional. So, I sort of said, well, why was it so effective? And he was like, because we just combined all those things really well, executed it well. We knew that these were the things that Adelaide were going to struggle with, and it worked out. And so I was really impressed with the way that he was able to do that, because it's very difficult as a visiting side to go somewhere and try and dictate the pace of the game and the style of the game. And that's something we've seen obviously with Chiefy's Phoenix sides, right? Is that they look to really slow things down, and that's why it tends to be quite effective for them. Although this season perhaps maybe less so than last, but because they have that confidence in their ability to be able to do what they want to do. And I think that the Wanderers did a really good job there. So really promising signs.
Do you think that the Wanderers should be a team that is still in consideration for the championship?
Perhaps not the championship, but I mean, they're definitely looking a better side than they were. Obviously, defensively, it's still very shaky. I mean, Adelaide, I think, had 0.2 or 0.3 expected goals in that game and managed to score twice. And they were both, just poor marking, I suppose, that led to them. So, in that regard, it is something that can be tidied up and cleaned up. And
they're rumored to be after Milos Degenek, right? I think was the rumor I saw going around. That could be interesting.
He's just been released from Red Star, so that's definitely a possibility. But I mean, even with the imports that they have brought, or the players that they have brought in, Jeong Tae-wook, obviously he's out injured, but he didn't look all that impressive when he was playing. So it's like, it does seem like they really need to sort out that defensive unit, because we've seen again that they can score a lot of goals, and that's been a hallmark of Stadic's sides for a while now. I mean, you look at Perth last season, right? Through all the shambles and things, they were still able to put the ball in the back of the net. Adam Taggart had a very, very good season. Wasn't he the Golden Boot winner? So it's clearly something that he puts a lot of focus in and makes sure that his players do well. It's about now making sure that they give time to that defensive unit to really sort out those issues, because if they can, consistently hold teams to even just 1 goal a game rather than 2, they're in a much better position to be getting some good results.
So Clune is a big loss as well, ACL, right? So he's been one of the unsung heroes in their midfield, really dictating the tempo of play as well. That was what led to Stadic's second yellow, right?
Well, as it turns out, it wasn't actually a second yellow. I thought it was, but I was obviously up in the press box. So I didn't get a great view of it. But we saw him get sent off. I just assumed it was a second yellow because he was already on one. He said post-match that it was a straight red card.
Right.
He wasn't 100% sure on what it was that merited that straight red, but he was told that it was because he obviously left his technical area. I believe it was something to do with him stepping onto the pitch.
Yeah, let me give you the official MRP. Deliberately leaving the technical area to act in a provocative or inflammatory manner, or entering the opposition technical area in an aggressive or confrontational manner, or to enter the video operation room. So I think it's the first one of those.
Yeah. So there you go. That's what did it. But it was a response from him to a lot of what was being said by the Adelaide staff and players on the bench, who perceived Scicluna to be obviously trying to waste time, perhaps taking some lessons from that Brisbane Roar game that they had only the week before and going, oh, can we get the points here? And I don't think it was helped either by the fact that he was then kept on the pitch and went down 2 or 3 more times after that as well.
Yeah.
Not only would that have probably aggravated the injury and arguably made it worse, but also it made it look like it wasn't a serious matter.
Legit,
and that they were just trying to kill the game off. So perhaps a little bit of poor management there. But by that point, obviously, Stajic wasn't there to make the decisions anyway. So
he tried to be, though. He tried to sneak his way to the front of the tunnel.
He did. Apparently not a great view from there, from the tunnel, because he was then asked about the Ryan Kitto incident where he kicks the ball back into the Wanderers bench. And he was just like, hi, I mean, I was in the tunnel. I couldn't really see. It's not a great view. So, he might have tried to get us to push the boundaries as much as possible. But clearly didn't have much of an influence after that.
Is on Adelaide, do you think Delianov is now becoming a bit of a liability? Because he's the last shot, again, not a goalkeeper expert, maybe we can ask Will, but it seemed to be quite a savable shot. Then you go to last week where they dropped those points at home as well. It really does feel like he's been and obviously you can do better in hundreds of moments throughout a 90-minute game of football, but late on in matches in the big moments, it's been his errors that have been costly and dropped points for Adelaide. Is it something where they have to go looking in January to give a real good crack at the championship? Because, they are the last undefeated team in the league up until this week. So they have to be with a shout. Can they go on and do it with a keeper like Delianov?
I don't think Delianov is the answer, to be honest. I thought he was fantastic in the first stint that he had as starter at the club, and then he was injured, and then that's when Gauci stepped in and took over the role. And I think what really hurt him was that 18 to 20 months of not playing first team football at all. He was ineligible for the NPL side, the Adelaide United NPL side, so he couldn't play for them, and he wasn't going to get in over Gauci in the first team at that point in time. And then he came back in, and it looked like somebody who hadn't played in 18 to 20 months. And I don't think that he's really been able to get back to where he was since that. And it's just, technical errors, mental errors that, obviously we've been seeing a lot of them from goalkeepers across the league this season. It seems to be a growing feature and a concern amongst all the goalkeepers. But Delianov in particular has been one to cost the side points. And I don't think that they necessarily need to go looking. Obviously they signed Maxwell Tooley in the off season as sort of a prospect, Ethan Cox as well. I suspect that he will probably be in sooner rather than later, but they're just holding off a little bit because he suffered an injury in training to his finger. Right. And so he's just sort of rehabbing from that.
You reckon he's A-League ready?
They gave him some minutes at the end of last season. I believe it was against the Mariners. And I thought that in terms of his shot stopping, he looked a lot better than Delianov. Perhaps a little bit less confident on the ball, but that's because he hasn't quite had the experience at that level. And he wasn't particularly helped out by the defence in that game either, who were hitting the balls in quite hard to him. And it was a bit difficult for him to control. But you can't know for sure if they're going to do well until you give them a shot, right? And I think that at this point, Delianov is becoming, I don't want to say a liability, but I don't think he's quite to the standard that Adelaide need, especially when the sort of defence that Adelaide has done this season has been very inconsistent and spotty. Obviously a couple of really good clean sheets, but typically very leaky and relying on the goalkeeper a lot. And when the goalkeeper's the one making the mistakes, you can't rely on them. You're going to concede a lot. So I think it's worth giving Cox a go. I'd be surprised if he's in this round. It might be another week just to make sure. That is a very, very good question.
I wonder.
It is
Adelaide United.
MacArthur.
Okay.
MacArthur away as well. So
tough test. Yeah,
it is. I'd be surprised to see him in again, just simply because of that injury. I don't think they'll want to rush him, especially if they're viewing him as the goalkeeper of the future. To then have to set him back with another injury again. So,
let me throw a curveball at you. So, given Adelaide's track record of playing youth, maybe they're not the club that is interested in this. But if they do think they're going to push for a championship this year, then maybe they'll be tempted. But Jack Duncan has had a very good start to the year for Melbourne Victory.
He has.
when January comes, he's going to be, competing against Mitchell Langerak. You'd imagine Victory would be more than happy to shove straight into the starting spot. And then you've got a really quality A-League keeper who's at least in the top probably 4 or 5 keepers of the league this season, who was all of a sudden going to be in number 2 with only 6 months left of his contract. And is probably known for a while he's not going to finish out the season with Victory. Is there another A-League club that is willing to do something? Is it mutual termination? Are Victory going to hold on to him because they don't want to strengthen a rival? I don't know. But surely, he spent plenty of time on the bench at Wellington as well. Surely he's keen for an actual starting keeper role, maybe.
Yeah, it's a good shout. It's either going to be he moves somewhere else, or Victory have undeniably the best goalkeeping room in the league.
Yeah.
With those two, a bit like Adelaide did a couple of seasons ago with Gauci and Delianov, and everyone was saying, well, I mean, you can't go wrong with that. But now obviously we're starting to see Delianov again, and it's like, maybe you can go wrong. I mean, it's not a bad shout. It's an interesting idea. Whether they'd terminate the contract of somebody of that caliber is the other question, because it does happen, right? Jay Barnett was an instance where Victory terminated his contract and he moved to Adelaide, but at that point he was sort of this really unproven prospect who hadn't been very good in the minutes he'd been given.
Well, even more recently, Ben Falami, right?
Ben Falami, yeah. So I mean, it's not unprecedented, but I think unless Duncan really pushes for it, I don't think it'll happen.
There'd be a few clubs that would be keen on him, though. Definitely at the end of the season.
For sure.
They will have no shortage of suitors.
There's been some poor goalkeeping across the league, so it wouldn't be surprised if there was interest.
All right, let's move on a little. I want to touch on Costa Barbarouses because he's just scored his 99th A-League goal. What a banger it was, by the way. Yeah. I felt so sorry, honestly, for Robbie Stanton as the coach. Like, just... you work all week to set up a game plan, and within 2 minutes of the game starting, you give up such a poor turnover and then see a goal like that go in. And then a little bit sorry for Ryan Scott as he struggled to get out of the net after the goal as well. But incredible goal from Costa. He's had a remarkable couple of years since he went back to Wellington. I think 99. So I think that's, I want to say, 4th all time on the A-League list. So you got Jamie McLaren, Bessart, Barisha, and there's one other I'm forgetting. I had it up.
Bruno.
Before. Yeah, Bruno. That's it. Bruno
yeah.
Fornarola. Yeah, and then it's Costa Barbarouses in behind. So he's becoming a legend of the league. He's going to score his 100th probably next week. There's or maybe he has a little gap actually, because we know he likes scoring goals in December, and that was his last game in December. So maybe you have to wait.
Another year.
Yeah, another 11 months till December. But he's going to get it soon enough, right? And it will really cement him as just an all-time champion of the league across some of the bigger clubs in the league. Of course, Victory in Sydney, but of Wellington as well, I'm sure holds a special place in his heart. He's just been an outstanding player.
Yeah, and this move to Wellington has almost sort of rejuvenated his career in a little bit, because it felt like he'd stagnated, and then he gets the chance to go back over to New Zealand and he's scoring goals again, and he looks really good and dynamic and threatening going forwards. So, it's awesome to see that, and it's, great to see for a side like Wellington as well, because you mentioned these sorts of things always happening to the big clubs. And so the fact that, they're able to have, I suppose, a part in this story is awesome. And I mean, the goal that he scored for it as well. Yeah. It was very well taken, to be fair. Cause it's very, very easy to over or under hit those ones. But he did get it right. He got it in the back of the net. And, you mentioned sort of how would Stanton be feeling in that moment. He'd probably be feeling like it was a case of deja vu, because we've seen that from the Jets a few times this season, where there have been silly turnovers early in games. My mind immediately goes back to the Adelaide game that they had, where the ball was turned over to Archie Goodwin in the 6-yard box. And it's like, you can ill afford those sorts of mistakes so early in a game. And, it's happened here again for them. And yeah, it's going to be really frustrating for him as a coach, because he's been speaking all season about eliminating those mistakes and making sure that they have players that they can turn to make sure that they're doing their job and are sort of these beacons of consistency. And it's just clear that there's nobody there in that squad who is capable of doing that. And it means that they're going to have very inconsistent results. and very inconsistent patterns of play. And I think that for a coach, that's a really difficult thing to try and handle, because obviously you want things to go right. You want them to stick to the plan, but if the plan fails because of mistakes, you've got to switch things up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's difficult for him. And then Ryan Scott getting stuck in the net. I feel that. I feel that sometimes where you just, especially when you're trying to be, you've just been humiliated almost, and you just don't want to make a big fuss out of anything. You just want to get the ball out and just go back to the kickoff. And then of course your foot gets stuck in the net, and then you trip over in front of everybody, and it's just compounding.
I don't know if you've seen it. There was a great clip of, I think it was Brad Guzan in the MLS a couple of months ago in the playoffs. Inter Miami are playing, I think it's Chicago Fire, I want to say.
I think I've seen this, yeah.
Messi scores the goal. Guzan, they're having a go trying to get the ball back. I think it's like Luis Suarez or something that comes in and just shoves him into the net.
Yeah.
And they're all like pointing, getting stuck into him. And he's like flailing around in the net, like trying to get up.
Trying to save his own life.
Yeah. Trying to save his dignity.
That's great.
Goalie stuck in net moments, good fun. But it's going to be a little bit tough for Wellington. I think Marco Roas out for a month with another ankle injury. The link up between him and Costa has been exceptional the last couple of weeks since he's been fully fit. Chiefy talked in preseason about Rojas being a very key part of that team. They've struggled even with him in the team, so without him again, despite getting the win here as well, that'll be tough. Although apparently Tim Payne, Chiefy also thought was going to be out for ages, and then he was just right to go.
Fine, yeah. So, not sure what's happened there.
Maybe we'll see Rojas next week. Who knows?
Yeah, perhaps he's just bluffing this whole time, and trying to get people to go, oh, that's all right. They don't have this player this week, so we'll be fine there. We don't have to focus on that. And then it's, a wild card of, he's actually fine. He's going to be playing.
Honestly, the APL have to get a lot more stringent on these squad announcements, because several times I've been made a fool of by talking about these teams on a Thursday night. And then, people will listen to the podcast. I'm sure people are relating to this right now. I've said someone's out of the team. They're listening to it on a Friday. And then on a Saturday, they're playing. And it's like, well, I'm the one that looks silly, but you said he was out of the squad. So maybe we just have to stop talking about the teams. Unless
what do we talk about then?
I don't know. We'll find something. But unless we have like direct quotes from coaches, it's all a lie. Even then, sometimes it's all a lie. The other Kiwi team, Auckland, had a good bounce back. Very comprehensive 4-1 victory. I really like that goal from Jake Bremer as well. The flick up, not so intentional, but just the little dink with the foot. So delicate, so nice.
Fantastic. It did just look like it was a bump in the road, and they're back in it now. Obviously away as well to the Mariners. So proving they can do it on Australian soil, and they're fine. And just a very comprehensive performance. Hiroki Sakai got on the score sheet for the first time, which obviously we've seen him sort of, I suppose, involved in goals and involved in the build-up. I think it's been those 2 own goals that come from his crosses.
That's true. They were both own goals. He hasn't actually scored.
He's not actually scored yet. So
that's funny, because I was watching it and I'm like, the celebration is so familiar, but you wouldn't think it was his first goal.
Yeah, that's right. He knows what he's doing. He's been there before, kind of. But no, nice to see him get on the score sheet. And then, that Jake Brimmer finish, I thought, just if you wanted to distill that Auckland performance into one moment, I thought it was that finish, because it was just, you mentioned sort of the flick up, perhaps a little bit unintentional, but to be able to capitalize on that with such a nice finish, I thought was like, Auckland have just done everything right. And sometimes things aren't going to go their way, but in this game, they've just been able to capitalize on it every single time.
That finish like takes you back to his Johnny Warren Melbourne victory season. Yeah. Like that's what it was about, that kind of touch and technique.
And I think that's the gamble that Auckland took, right? Was they're like, we know that he can be that sort of a player.
100%.
He's just not been in recent years. Can we unlock that? And it's, obviously it might be a little bit early to say for sure that they have, but that finish was, prime Brimmer. Just if they can keep getting that from him, combined with the other performances that they've been having across the park, they're still far and away the best side in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good from Auckland. And that's the test, right? It's like they were always going to lose a game eventually. Yeah. And then the question becomes, champions teams, it's not about how much you can at a club sometimes. It's how often you can take a hit and lose a game and then bounce back really strong. So that's a really good message to send their fans, and they look as strong as ever. I think now it's a 4-point gap at the top of the league, something like that.
Yep. because
So
because Adelaide and Victory both managed to
both
bottle
managed to.
games that people thought that they would win. So
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. So now they're 4 points clear. They've got some free reign up the top of the table. They're looking pretty good. Tell you who's not looking pretty good. Perth Glory. Another loss.
low
Another
punch
loss.
there.
And yeah, it was a little bit of a low blow. But once again, more issues off the field. We've seen 2 mutual terminations of contracts before we even get into the January transfer window. Kanga and Caicedo out the door. Mustafa Amini was the latest player to join them. However, that was not a mutual termination. The PFA have announced on Monday that they are supporting him in his legal action against the club. He's suing for unlawful termination. It's been a bit of a tricky situation. He's been injured for a long time. I think Drulich said in a presser he hadn't been part of a main group training session since he'd been involved. So obviously you need both sides of the story. We have no idea what's going on behind the scenes, but that is just more distractions for Perth Glory. And I don't know, is it a good thing that we're talking about the off the field rather than the on the field? Is that a little bit of protection for them?
Are they deliberately doing this stuff?
Well, maybe not deliberately, but it's helpful, right?
It does help. That being said, they've still got 5 points. They're not bottom, so
Ridiculous.
take that as well. But look, the interesting thing is sort of a case of that question of why. Surely the club is smart enough to know that you can't just unilaterally terminate somebody's contract and then not expect
reasons,
not expect to be sued. So it'll be interesting to see why that decision was reached. Like you said, we don't know all the sides to the story, so typically this only happens when there is some serious breach of contract or misconduct or something like that, right? Like, if he's broken the law potentially, but I'm not suggesting that's what's happened, but that sort of thing is typically when we see these terminations happen. So definitely an interesting situation for both player and club, because I think, Amini will have viewed this as a chance to reset himself as a footballer. Obviously, he's had a very topsy-turvy career. Got that move over to, was it Borussia Dortmund? And then, that sort of fell apart, and he didn't really get much going over in Europe. And, he's been bouncing around, and he's come back, and I think sort of was viewed as perhaps being a leader in this Glory side. And,
well, he was a captain, right?
Well, he was, yeah. And then, injuries and things like that. And then, when he did get time on the pitch, it wasn't fantastic. And, it's not been a great spell for him. And so therefore not been great for the club either as a bit of business. So,
and reportedly he's one of the higher earners as well, which you have to take into consideration with these things.
For sure. And I think it's probably quite difficult for Glory fans because, look, like I said, it's not like he was a standout player and fantastic for them or anything. But you're still losing, an experienced squad player, which that's huge. And obviously he was the captain. But then also, you're seeing the club be very, very ruthless with some of the decisions that they're making with players halfway through a season. And that can be a good or a bad sign. And we're still not quite sure which way that's going to swing yet, because obviously January at the time of recording is not quite upon us. So whether or not they do actually make moves and aggressively bring people in, or if they're just looking to cut numbers at this point in time, we're not sure. It's sort of this juxtaposition for the fans to try and deal with. And, I kind of feel for them, because it's a difficult spot to be in as a fan. And it's not like the club has been completely open about everything either. I mean, the statement that was made about Amini when his contract was terminated was basically, we've terminated his contract. We will not comment further on this.
Yep.
It's like, okay, thanks guys. Yeah, really helpful. Good to know. So it sucks for the Glory fans for sure.
Yeah. By the way, this feels like a good point to mention. The European transfer window and a lot of others around the world that opens on January 1st, that's not the case in Australia. It's around the 15th or the 16th.
Yeah, it's a bit later. Yeah.
So mid-January, don't expect any players to be coming in terms of regular transfers until then. The other team that actually is on the bottom of the table, Brisbane Roar, had another shocker. I mean, they lost again, right?
They lost,
to Western. But I think the most interesting thing out of Brisbane this week is more transfer rumours for Thomas Waddingham, and it sounds like a little bit more serious chat as well with Middlesbrough and Sheffield Wednesday. They're the latest floated teams. They're both championship, right? I know Middlesbrough definitely is.
Yes.
Yeah, Sheffield Wednesday as well.
Wednesday are a bit of a basket case of a club at the moment. So,
Right.
for his sake and for the future of his career, you'd hope he probably doesn't pick them. But
Okay.
we'll see. Middlesbrough is definitely an interesting prospect, obviously with Riley McGree there as well.
Absolutely. That'd be
Get that
sick.
link up going. There's the future of your Socceroos squad right there.
Mm-hmm.
Those two linking up in the final third. But no, it does definitely feel a lot more grounded. All these rumors that are floating around now about him, and I think part of that is because he's been able to back up those performances that he did have at the back end of last season, where everyone was just going, "Is this just the case of the newcomer on the scene has a couple good games, and everyone starts talking about him?" No, it's clear he's a very, very good player.
Oh yeah.
And so now the interest is clearly much more real because teams have seen, hang on, no, this kid is legit, and he can put the ball in the back of the net with frightening consistency. So it also helps that it's not it's Tottenham, right? Like
exactly.
They're more reasonable.
Yeah, and I think the championship is actually a really underrated league for Australians to transfer into because you're going to have such quality, like the quality of it's the best second division in the world, right? In terms of quality of the football.
Yeah, undeniably.
And they play so many games. So to be in a second division without the expectation of, being Nestor Ernkunda at Bayern Munich, you get to play in a really quality league with so many games and just get so many reps in without the first division expectations on you, I think would suit a player like him really well. Obviously, it's known as a very physical league. He's, he's very tall, but he's not the strongest. He's not the most well-built guy. Maybe you'd have to adapt a little bit, but his quality is so clear. Even that chance he had towards the end of the game, just like the drop of the shoulder one way and the touch inside the foot to take him past the defender.
Great movement.
It's awesome, right? You don't see that kind of technique from Australian nines very often. So I think his ceiling is incredibly high.
Yeah, and I think the other thing with the championship as well is that you're in and around the environment of a lot of extremely professional clubs, some that have just dropped down from the Premier League, some that have aspirations of going up. Yes, that does come with pressure of wanting to put in the performances, but yeah, you're in these setups that are highly professional. You're playing with players who have a lot of them Premier League experience, or you're around similarly aged players who are looking to get that chance to break into the big league. So, I think that just in terms of the environment that he'd find himself in there as well would be huge, alongside the quality of the matches that he'd be in. So, I think that for Australians in general, it's definitely somewhere that they need to look to. We've seen a big influx of Australian players to Scotland recently. But yet to really see them going into the championship there in England, and I think it's something that would serve a lot of the clubs there really well because they're getting high quality young players in, presumably for not a lot of money either, which is always a big thing for the championship clubs because those that have dropped down from the Premier League suddenly see their money just gone, and those that have been promoted are going to find a little bit extra cash to play around with. So, they're sort of in the market for these sorts of players. So I think it's good for the club. I think it's fantastic for the players. So yeah, I'd love to see it happen more often.
Who's going to leave the club first, Ruben Zadkovic or Thomas Waddingham?
That's a very good question. Who does Brisbane have next week?
So this is the thing, right? So their next two fixtures are the Mariners and the Jets, both at home. So these are two fixtures that this run of games, they're the ones you're going to win. If you're going to win any of them, you're going to win these ones.
Yeah.
And obviously Perth was in that mix as well, but they've blown that opportunity. So for me, it has to happen. If you're going to get rid of Zadkovic this year, it has to be this week. This week. It has to happen now because he's probably going to get a result in the next 2 weeks. Football's a funny game. Anything can happen. He's probably going to win one of these next two games. And then you're going to lose your legs to stand on to get rid of him. So it has to happen now, or you're committing to him for the rest of the season. And it's up to the owners if they think that's a good idea or not. Yeah,
it's a difficult one for sure. Look, we've seen coaches in this league sacked for a lot less than Zadkovic. So, it is a bit surprising to see him still around. And part of me feels like that's the club themselves making a statement by not making a statement, right? And it's sort of tacitly backing him by not actually not doing anything, perhaps. Or do you think that they're just biding their time? It seems weird to bide your time if you're consistently seeing these poor performances being put out, these comments being made by Zadkovic
Yeah,
that
I
are
don't like those
irritating
at all.
fans and you know, are just sort of, yeah, a weird position to be holding. And you know, yeah, so that's why it seems like to me the club are making a statement by not doing anything, and sort of silently backing him in that regard, because you know, if your coach is doing that sort of stuff and then isn't being able to back it up on the pitch with good performances, like, what are you doing? You've got to get rid of him. And I agree, if you're going to get rid of him, you've got to get rid of him as quick as possible, not only so that you can then, you know, hopefully settle the club through January, get that chance to maybe change things up if you have to, but also then be able to definitively write the season off, and then fans at least know, right, that is it for our season completely now.
Yeah.
You know, whereas if you're sticking by a coach and you're keeping him around, it's sort of also saying, oh, well, we're doing it because, you know, it's going to be best for the club. You know, and what, keeping him around so you can finish bottom is best for the club. How, you know, versus giving yourself that half a season extra time to look for somebody who's the right fit. So yeah, I think that, yeah, they've got to get rid of him ASAP. I don't expect Waddingham to, well, I'd hope Waddingham doesn't leave until the end of the season. And I think that perhaps it is, unless talks are already ongoing, it does feel like,
yeah. Well, that was the chat, right?
yeah, like if talks are ongoing and have already sort of started, then he could leave in January. That's definitely a possibility. But you know, if they're only just now starting, you know, you sort of know with these European clubs who some of their targets are much further in advance than, you know, late December.
You'd imagine he'd be keen to leave, though.
He would be because you're getting away from Brisbane. Like, you know, this is such a good opportunity for him, so he'd definitely probably be pushing for it. But then it's up to the club who wants to sign him. If they do just want to leave him for that half a season extra, give him a chance to round things out in Australia, and you know, hopefully put another 10 in the back of the net and have a really good season, and then move on with a bag full of confidence. But then, you know, perhaps the coaching decision plays an impact in the transfer as well, right? Whether or not Zadkovic is or is not sacked might influence Waddingham's mind. It might influence the clubs that are looking to sign him as well. So yeah, it's going to be one to keep an eye on.
I think, you know, this game was decided by the penalty, but again, Matt Sutton had such a big impact, a couple of really, really good saves. It feels like we've brought his name up every week for the last 3 rounds or so. He honestly is he the keeper of the year at the moment? Like,
it's got to be.
You know, Western have the best form line of the league at the moment with 3 wins. He's been pivotal in all of them. Even the game where they conceded 3 goals, he got 3 votes on the Alex Tobin medal. Like, he's been that good, right? I mean, maybe you're looking at Alex Paulson. You know, the team's up top. Jank Duncan's been good, right? He's had a good defense around him. Delianov certainly isn't, you know, winning any plaudits. We just talked about him earlier. Philip Curto is probably another contender, but it's probably those 2, right?
Yeah, for sure. It seems like an off season in general for keepers, where even those who are right at the top of who we're thinking is having a good season, like Sutton and like Curto, even then, I don't think this has been Curto's best season. And likewise, I don't think that this is the best that Sutton can do either. So it's, you know, it still seems like the whole level of quality of keepers as a whole has come down slightly this season, which is a little bit disappointing to see, but it means that we're seeing a lot of goals as well. So on the flip side, you've got that. But no, he's been tremendous, and Western are looking like a really, really good squad here, and a really good side. They're starting to get things going. Ibasuki on the score sheet again. Yes, okay, it's a penalty, but if you want somebody to score your penalty, you want it to be your starting 9, and he did that. So you know, you got to give him credit for that. You know, he's doing it. He's putting the ball in the back of the net, which is what they pay him to do, and that's why he was, you know, wanted by Adelaide and Western. Right? It's not. I think this is something that some Adelaide fans perhaps don't realise, is that Adelaide did want to keep him around. Like, of course you want to keep around somebody who you know can put goals away, who can score 13, 14 a season in the A-League. Like, that's such an invaluable thing to have. But then it was obviously the terms of the deal that's where it broke down, and Western could offer, Western could offer him that extra year that Adelaide couldn't. So he makes the move because it's the best fit for him, and Western get a great goal scorer to go with it, and started the season out slow, but the whole squad did, the whole team did. And now that they're starting to click into gear, and he's been an integral part of that. I mean, we mentioned the game against Sydney where in build-up and in transition he was such an important part, right? Receiving the ball at feet in the midfield and then able to get it out wide. He's also able to finish the ball at the end of the day as well. So, really, really big player to have for them. Physically, obviously he's big. He's like 6'3" or whatever he is, absolute giant. But Western are they're proving everybody wrong, right? I mean, how many of us had them in the bottom 4 this season thinking they're not going to achieve anything? I'm pretty sure I had them finishing bottom. I was like, I don't see anybody being worse than Western will be. So they've proven us wrong, and I think that's fantastic because it shows again what we're always talking about with the league, that anybody can beat anybody, and you can turn your fortunes around if you start doing things right, and that's what Western have done.
You know what else like Ibasuki's done is relieve the pressure on Noah Botic a bit as well. Yeah. He's allowed Botic to play as that foil and just not be looked at as the sole guy, and just be able to be that fox in the box, pick up the scraps, and he's got a couple of goals that way, right? So
yeah,
I think they've
that's the thing, right?
each other.
With these young strikers is sometimes just having only the one guy to go to is not a good thing for them, because yes, they're getting the minutes, but it means all the pressure's on them. And obviously, was it last season, the only real backup to him was Michael Roos, who let's be honest, is not a fantastic striker, or at least hasn't been with Western. So it did sort of feel like perhaps he was being limited by the fact that he was the only option, whereas now he's able to learn from Ibasuki, and there's perhaps a little bit of competition going on there. But then, it also takes focus off of some aspects of things so that he can just go, I want to score goals. I want to put the ball in the back of the net and, be able to be on the end of chances. And that's what he can do now with less pressure on him. So I think that's huge. And it's something that I think most coaches in the league will talk about, is getting the balance of experience and veterans to youngsters right in the squad to make sure that there is that balance. And Western have, we've spoken about, they are a very young squad, but they do have pieces there in sort of each of those units, defensive, midfield and attack, that are those veteran or very experienced presences who can, sort of guide some of the younger players in the right direction. And I think that's fantastic.
Absolutely. Let's finish off with a little bit of international news. Unfortunately, not quite good news for Harry Suter, who is out for the season with a serious Achilles issue. And that makes it now him and Alessandro Tricati, 2 first-choice Socceroos centre-backs, out through injury. That really puts a spanner in the works. Of course, we have crucial World Cup qualifiers coming up in the new year. He is going to be absent from those. Obviously, you've got Jason Guerrier and Cameron Burgess, who you'd think be locks, right? Cameron Burgess, definitely. He's been playing 90 minutes in the Premier League. And Jason Guerrier has been very good as well. So you're going to have to find another centre-back. It's probably Kai Rouse, which helps that we've had someone as experienced as him internationally. But Suter is unquestionably one of Australia's most important players. Scores a lot of goals as well, especially in Asian qualifications. So that's a massive, massive blow.
Yeah, and it's one of those players who you're almost certain is going to be a lock in the starting 11 every time that he's available. So, huge out. A lot to think about in terms of squad planning now. I think it will be Kai Rouse who will come straight into that starting spot, especially if they're going to persist with that back 3 and the wing back sort of thing that they've been doing. But perhaps this does necessitate a change, and you move to a sort of more traditional back 4, so you can have Guerrier as a right back, Rouse and Burgess as your 2 centre backs. Perhaps that's an option. We'll see what happens, but it's a huge out for the Socceroos, and it's kind of frustrating as well, because from a developmental point of view for Suter, because there was a lot of talk about his future being in doubt with the Socceroos because he didn't have a club at the start of the season. And then he finds one, he's getting game time, and he's starting for the Socceroos, and then he gets this massive injury.
So much stunted development.
It feels like it's another setback, which is something that can ill afford. So, really, really disappointing. And, wish him the best in his recovery, and hope to see him back out there soon, because, he's a tremendously entertaining player when he is out there, especially playing for Australia against some of those smaller opposition where he just towers over everyone in the box. It's hilarious to see, but he's a very, very good centre back. So he's going to be a huge absence.
So obviously straight away now he's looking at the 26 World Cup. which will be in July of 26, and thinking that's got to be the target. We know, did he play like one practice game before the Asian Cup, or one and a half or something like that, after coming back from his ACL? So we know he can do that recovery. So best of luck to him. That's such a shame, really, for him to go out. I did see an interesting note from Vince Rugari on Twitter. Mario Balotelli is open to an offer from the A-League, according to quote sources from Vince. Look, Vince is good. I'm sure he knows what he's talking about. Interesting. He's been released from somewhere, right? I don't even know how old he is now. I always know him.
33, 34, something like that.
Okay, so not too old. I always remember him from that Man City. I think they did like a preseason tour to the US where he tried to do like a roulette finish and then he got subbed off immediately.
I remember that.
And I always thought, like, what a, bad word, D-head. Like, just put the ball in the back of the net, right? Like, what an idiot. But apparently he's open to the A-League. Hasn't got any offers, but apparently he's on the record saying, well, a source, whatever.
I'm sure he's open to offers from anywhere at this point.
Yeah.
Just happened to be asked, do you fancy a trip down to Australia? Short holiday? Sure.
Yeah. He'd be a character, wouldn't he?
If they could offer me the money for it, then, and that, I think that's going to be the question, right? Is can anybody actually afford him anyway?
Who is the club that culturally you reckon he'd fit into? It's either like Sydney FC or Perth Glory's bench, like
it's got a lot of storage about it, doesn't it? Yeah. Where it's like, out there in the West with the beaches and everything.
Shows up and the first thing he does is go on Instagram to find a hairdresser.
Yeah.
That'd be the vibes.
I was also thinking like maybe Melbourne City. Obviously he had the stint with Man City. Is that connection still there?
I think they're too serious though.
Yeah,
they're too serious. Maybe like that. Just I can just see him doing the photo shoot on Bondi Beach, just like getting it about it. I think that would be it. Well, given it is our final episode of the year, it's the final day if you're listening to this on release, the 31st, it is New Year's Eve. So we thought we'd give our New Year's resolutions for Australian football as well. And mine is going to be, hopefully, my New Year's resolution. I would love to see a commitment from the Queensland government to the redevelopment of Perry Park. If you're not aware, we kind of thought this was done, but the Queensland government, obviously a new government after the state election, have opened a 100-day, essentially, review of the Olympic Games infrastructure. So right now they are taking public submissions. I know another a number of football people have been calling out for this as well. But you can go right now to the submissions and make a public entry for the redevelopment of Perry Park. I encourage everyone to do so. This is the opportunity if we want to secure funds to get this stadium redeveloped and become a home, hopefully, for the Brisbane Roar, for any NST teams and NPL sides and whatever. It's clearly the long-term solution for a lot of football in Queensland. That would be amazing for 2025. I consider that a big success, Jacob.
That would be huge. You know what else would be huge is Australian football going a year without a big scandal, which is what I've put down, which I'm not sure what's more unlikely is Perry Park or that. But yeah, it just seems like there's something massive every year, whether it's, the grand final decision a couple of seasons ago, whether it's this gambling scenario with MacArthur.
That was this year's, right, wasn't it? That was the big one this year.
Or, we've still got half a season to, although actually no, because it's by year. So that was this year's big one. Or you have, the stuff that's been going on with, fan trouble and things like that, like the Melbourne Derby one, right? Is another big one that it's like, can we just have a year of relative normality? Like, I don't mind some of the funny little nuances that just are part of Australian football, right? It's flawed and we know that, but can it just have an absence from the front page of the news for bad reasons, like just for a year, please?
You know what else? I want to throw in a bonus here because you've just reminded me of something. More widespread media attention for football. And I'm not even going to be too greedy here. Just from Channel 10 networks, you have the rights. You're incentivized to push football. Let me give you... Okay, so I was watching The Project the other night, right? And they were doing their year in sport review for 2024. And I'm going to list you 3 things that they talked about in that segment without ever mentioning the Central Coast Mariners going on a continental treble, okay? They mentioned an Australian winning the cheese roll down the big hill, the wife carrying competitions, an Australian pair won that as well, and some Australian bloke on Twitch completing the highest level ever of Tetris. Before ever mentioning the Central Coast Mariners going on what is remarkably one of the best Australian sporting achievements of all time, let alone 2024. So please just come on. What are we doing here?
I think that's the thing, right? Is that there's so many good stories that are there for the taking, but it's those negative hit pieces that just do better for your regular media publications, and so that's why we see it more frequently, and it's really
on
irritating.
Channel 10 as well.
Yeah,
it's Channel 10.
They're the rights owners.
you can even play the footage. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Just
it's very, very disappointing. I'm with you on that. And,
anyway,
that's we try to do our part, but we don't quite have that reach. So
no. Let's leave that in 2024. We hope 2025 will be a new year, a better one, a more prosperous one for Australian football and the A-League, and for you as well. We hope you have a good New Year's Eve. Celebrate hard. And we'll see you all in the new year. But that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Jacob Stevens, thank you very much for joining me today.
No problem, Lucky. It was good fun, just the two of us. I think is it our highest ever?
It's not anymore.
Not anymore,
but it was.
But maybe we can buck that trend and get this one to the top. Most listened again, just the two of us. But it's always good fun.
Always good fun. All right, thank you all, everyone, again very much for listening at home. We will be back for your regular scheduled episode. Of course, we have a few midweek A-League games this week. I believe 1 Tuesday and 2 on the Wednesday as well. So we'll be back on Friday in our normal slot to take on some of those and look forward to the weekend as usual. But we will be back. And then, thank you for listening. Goodbye.